Welcome to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, where we talk all things good food, good business, and good cars. And now, here is your host, Arnold Garcia, founder and CEO of Petra Automotive Products. Let's roll.
We got the privilege of today having Philip John on the phone. We call him Phil. I got the privilege to meet him a couple of months ago, and just an incredible person with a great history. He doesn't know this, but a lot of people that he knows have talked to me about him.
No.
And so I think it's going to be a great show that you're going to love. Phil, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Phil, where were you born?
San Antonio.
San Antonio, Texas.
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't move far away from...
No, I did. Well, I didn't stay that long. My dad was in the Air Force, so we lived all over. And most exotically, we lived 4 years in Tripoli, Libya.
No kidding.
Yeah, when I was a kid.
It's slightly different than San Antonio.
Slightly different.
It's slightly different than San Antonio, than the Texas, especially San Antonio back then, you know.
Yeah.
Where was high school at time?
Well, 2 years was when we came back to San Antonio for a while at Central Catholic High School in San Antonio. And then 2 years at Rantoul Township High School in Rantoul, Illinois. A place no one has been to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know where that's at.
No. But they're all places with big Air Force bases.
Okay. So when you graduated from high school, where'd you go to college?
The University of Texas. And got there because my dad was an Aggie. And all of his friends...
Wait a minute, you got to University of Texas because your dad was an Aggie?
Yeah, because all of his friends would fly in and they said, you know, your dad was an Aggie and you ought to be an Aggie. And I said, well, this is 1961. I said, they don't have women. They said, well, yeah. And I said, no, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. For people that don't know, it was like a male cadet school for a while, right?
It was.
So you go to UT. You did all your study there,
Yeah, I did undergraduate and then I went to law school there.
but also there.
Right.
So you got a law degree from UT.
I did.
When you left UT, what was your first job?
Baker Botts in Houston.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, and that was an interesting story. The legal practice is a lot different today than it was. But in my day, jobs were not that easy to come by. And so I worked my way through school, except for law school. And so I'm between my second and third year in law school, and I need to get a job in the summer. And so a fraternity brother of mine who was a little older than I, who was already in Houston and already working at Baker Botts, said, well, maybe you can get a job at Baker Botts for the summer. I said, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean? I said, I have to make money this summer, and they're going to charge me. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, I'm going to be this like going to school. He said, no, they're going to pay you. I said, you're kidding. No, they're going to pay you. How much? $100 a week. And that was all the money in the world.
Yeah, I guess it was back then, right?
Yeah. So I came down and worked for the summer.
So that would be like a paid internship today.
A paid internship today, exactly.
Right.
And that was the first time I'd ever been in Houston.
Why did you pick law? At what point did you go, you know what, I want to be an attorney?
Well, that's another story. Remember John Connally?
Yes, I do.
So John Connally and my mother were the first king and queen of the Peanut Festival in Wilson County, Texas. So he goes way back, and my grandparents were living in Floresville, and I was visiting them, and the school had a Halloween do in the auditorium, and I went, and John Connally was there. And at that time, he was Sid Richardson's lawyer, and I just knew him as a friend of my mother's and somebody who had been the king of the Peanut Festival. And he came up to me, and I'm 12 years old. He said, Phil Jr., what do you think about doing? I said, well, I haven't thought about it. He said, well, what do you like doing? So I told him the things I was interested in. And he said, well, you know what? You ought to be a lawyer like your Uncle Joe and your Uncle John. And I thought about it. I said, yeah, that makes sense. So
What were the things you liked?
well, arguing. I like arguing. I like reading.
Debating?
I was curious.
Yeah.
You know, anything that didn't require manual skills, I could do
That's great. At 12 years old.
at 12 years old.
That's a great story.
Well,
I mean, especially the person that tells you, what do you want to do?
exactly.
And says, why don't you follow this route? And you did it.
I did.
You never looked back and said, maybe I want to do something else. Like, were you in 1 or 2 years in law school and go, I should have been an engineer?
No. I'm good at a very few things, but that's important. And if I'm not good at something, it really frustrates me. So it tends to narrow your life, which is both good and bad.
Because you want to excel at whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So instead of doing all this, we'll pick a few that we can excel in
Yeah.
and master it too. So for the people that don't know, which probably don't, but Baker Bott's very, I would say, prestige, well-known law firm, right? When you say that?
I would say, well, first of all, it's the oldest law firm in Texas.
Okay.
And when I was in school, it was, this is about bragging, I think the preeminent law firm in Texas. And so if you got a job offer there, you thought, well,
I would think so, because wasn't Jim Baker's dad or grandfather the one that started it?
it was his great grandfather. So there have been 5 James A. Baker at Baker Botts.
No kidding.
So the first was the guy that originated it was a judge who started off in Huntsville, Texas. And then his son was Captain Baker, who famously got Rice University created. And then his son was a guy without any appellation. He was just a guy. And then his son was Secretary Baker. And then the 5th was Jamie Baker.
Wow.
Wow.
What a great legacy.
Yeah.
And still going.
Still going.
Still going. And you were there for how many years?
41.
Still there?
I'm retired. We had
Retired.
a mandatory retirement.
Now, you were a litigator?
I was a trial lawyer.
Trial lawyer.
There's a difference.
Okay, what's the difference?
A litigator pushes papers and argues motions, and a trial lawyer goes before a jury and tries cases.
They fight.
They fight. And there's a lot of difference between the two.
I didn't know that, actually, because you always, I guess I don't know, and I obviously through my career, I have several attorneys, but I'm going to go back to my general counsel and go, hey, you litigator or trial attorney? Because I always thought they were the same, right? The litigator, I thought, was the one that got in front of the people in court and fought it.
Well,
But that's a good illustration.
there are really 2 divisions in law. There's people who are office lawyers and people who go to court.
And you were the court guy.
I was the court guy. But more importantly, the jury guy. So a lot of people are really good at arguing to a judge. They're really good at papers. They're really good at briefing. But they have trouble relating to jurors. And so the whole thing about trial work is you really have to be able to know what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. It's acting and salesmanship, as you know. And
You're convincing people your side.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I have a friend of mine who has a business, predominantly works in the pharmaceutical side, but she's a psychologist.
Okay.
But she doesn't practice psychology as far as with people. She's hired by law firms.
Sure.
To look at the jury.
But jury, you gotta
That's
jury
right.
pick.
Pick jury and then tell them how it's going.
That's right.
So is court like people see on TV?
Not as glamorous.
Not as theatric?
Well, it can be. It depends on the judge. It depends on the lawyers. Some judges think that they're God,
The star of the show.
and they're going to run the show, and they're going to muscle you. And other judges, are going to sleep on the bench and let you have free reign. So it just depends. And it depends on the character of the lawyers.
So you pretty much know that when you got the case, you look at the judge and you go, okay, I know this is going to be this way.
Absolutely. And you have to be flexible. You have to figure out. Yeah. So that's the great thing about trial work. You have to figure out the judge, the lawyer on the other side, the witness, and the jury, all at the same time, and making a decision that you have to make in about 2 seconds.
Yeah. You've practiced law for 41 years. Do you think it's changed dramatically or is still pretty much the same?
I think it's changed dramatically in the sense that there are a lot more people practicing. The camaraderie's gone. It's become more business than a profession. And so in my day, most people who wanted to be lawyers didn't go into it to make a lot of money. And today, people think, well, this is a way to make money. And in my day, that was just,
The business versus the passion.
that's right. And, you want to go where you were challenged the most, could develop the most.
It's also the old saying, right? Where they say that if you do what you love every day, it's not a job,
That's right.
right? But if you're doing it for money, you may not love it, and it's going to feel like a job.
That's exactly.
So I enjoy what I do, like you enjoyed what you did. I think it's changed a little. In my world, automotive world, I don't think it's changed as much. It's still a very old-fashioned business, and I say this all the time. But what has changed on the business side is that more consolidation. So where there used to be a Phil John that owned 2 dealers,
Yeah.
now there's an X company that owns 300, and that has become more business, and it's taken away the personal.
Well, the law, in a way, has gone the other way. So when I started in Houston, there were 3 major firms, and the bulk of business that you wanted to handle that was challenging would go to one of those 3 firms, and nobody from outside came in. It was, in a way, a closed shop. And probably starting maybe 20 years ago, and firms here began saying, well, there are other markets. So we opened offices in other places, and still nobody came to Houston. And then suddenly they got the word, that Houston was such a great place for the legal practice that they all began opening offices. And they would come in, and rather than the expense of developing an office, they would go cherry pick lawyers and offer them lots of money. And, bring us your clients and bring us your associates. And so now we have a functioning law firm, in 1 month's time.
So you kind of buy the business.
You buy the business.
You buy.
So that's why I say it's become a business.
How many attorneys does Baker Botts have?
Oh, about 800. Wow. Well, no, some of these law firms have 2,000.
No kidding. Yeah. That's massive, I would think. Yeah. So many.
Offices everywhere. And Baker Botts has like 9 or 10 offices.
Yeah. But it started in Houston.
It started in Houston.
I'm sure they have an office in D.C. now.
They do.
Yeah. Predominantly oil and gas, right?
Intellectual property and oil and gas.
Yeah. Business attorneys.
Business attorneys.
Business attorneys. So you go to UT, you become an attorney.
Right.
You're doing what we call today an internship at Baker Botts. So you've only had one employer your whole career?
That's right.
That's amazing.
Well, one, I had jobs working through college. And
No, I know. But in your
But
professional
most jobs, I've had
Yeah.
one job. I'll go one further. I've owned one home, and I've had one wife.
you're one guy.
So I told you, I narrowed it down.
Well, that's good. Listen,
but
you
I-
got the wife thing down. You did the career thing down. So the house thing down.
But, growing up, traveling, going from one place to another, I was just determined I was going to not move everything.
I could see that.
Yeah, so I went the other extreme.
Right. I can see that. I can see that as a child, you're moving and you're like, okay, I'm not going to do this to my kids or whatever. And you go the opposite, which seems to be in everything. There's always, I remember this good friend of mine also would say, Arnold, it's always the extremes and then they'll end up somewhere in the middle. But, everybody goes all the way over here. Well, then they realize that's an extreme.
That's it.
So then they go all the way over here and this will bounce back and forth, but it'll settle somewhere.
It's the pendulum theory.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with that.
It'll settle somewhere in the middle. So you go to Baker Botts.
Yeah.
What was you don't have to give me a name, but your first big case? How'd you feel? Were you worried? What are you thinking?
I was worried. I was stunned.
Because you got a company saying, "I trust you to get me out of this," or "I trust you to give me this."
Yeah. I've tried lots of cases. The ones you remember aren't necessarily the biggest cases. So when I began, you look for any opportunity to get to court and try a case. And what inevitably happens is lawyers who are there longer than you will say, well, here, take this case and try. Well, they're not going to give you the great cases. They're going to give you the losers. So, I'm naive, and this guy says, well, I've got this case for Continental Can Company in Galveston, and they've got a lease where they stored their cans that went to the Falstaff Brewery that used to be in Galveston. And the place is just turned into a disaster, and the forklifts are going through the floor, and there are pigeons in there, and the pigeons are dropping into the cans, and it's just unsanitary. So they walked the lease, and they got sued. And the guy who had who was the landlord, was a guy named Ben Druce, who was a slumlord in Galveston. And that much I knew. And this is in the days when you didn't have to disclose your things. It was all trial by ambush. You didn't know who the other guy's witnesses were, much less what they were going to say. So I go to pick a jury, and I'm going to pick a jury of people, and they're going to know that this guy's a slumlord. No, what people aren't going to like a slumlord? So I pick that kind of jury, and so things go great. My witnesses do well, and the slumlord doesn't do well. And I think everything's over. So plaintiff goes first, and I'm the defendant, I go second. Well, at the end, he says, Your Honor, I have a rebuttal witness. Who could this be? And the door opens, and the jury all turns because they're curious. And as one, they say, Good afternoon, Reverend Brown. And Reverend Brown comes in and takes the witness stand, and Reverend Brown announces that he, besides being a preacher, is in charge of the warehouse, and that there are no pigeons in there, and those were, that was before I.
So it's like a surprise witness, a real surprise witness that you didn't know until the moment.
And so I'm going, this is bad.
It sounds bad.
I'm looking at the jury, and they're just, and so the older lawyer had gone with me just to make sure I didn't kill myself. I'm thinking I've really got to score some points. So I start questioning him, and the more I questioned him, the worse it got. And he finally just kicked me and said, Shut up.
Let her go.
So I learned more from that than the next 20 cases, all of which I won. You really learn from.
But that wouldn't happen today, right? Because they would have to disclose that.
It would not happen today if you did your homework. Yeah, it would not.
Mm-hmm. Did you win that case?
With the Reverend Brown? God, no.
Oh, yeah. I would say in my mind as you're saying the story, I go, well, that's kind of a low shot, right? Because you bring the Reverend in when nobody's going to go against the Reverend of a town like Galveston.
Where half of them were his parishioners.
Right. It's just like, I can't go against my pastor. This is the guy.
He's not going to lie.
Yeah. No, I think I can see how that whole thing.
But I was being so clever in picking that jury, and of course, I picked the perfect jury for the other side, and they knew what they were doing.
Yeah, they had that surprise up their sleeve. Yeah. What would you say when you were going to college to study lawyers? Was there a moment or in time when you said this is just too hard, or because you're so driven and focused, you were getting it?
No, I actually enjoyed it. I do well in school. It's one of my strengths, and. So I enjoyed the professors, I enjoyed the classes, I enjoyed the camaraderie, the law students, and I just, it really appealed to me.
It was a good test.
So I had no regrets.
What about as an attorney? Did you enjoy the 41 years, or is there one thing that you can say this was the peak of my career, and this was the valley of my career?
I would say I enjoyed it almost till the end. I got into a lot of high-profile stuff. There was a guy named Boone Pickens who was a pretty famous guy. I did all of his takeover litigation, and I was doing all of AT&T's big cases. So I was doing, the top of the cream of cases. And you had alluded to this, that the practice evolved so that you now get outside professionals to help you pick a jury, and you'd also conduct mock trials. And that was they picked that up from marketing. And so you would have these jurors, and you would put on a mock trial, and then they would go deliberate, and you'd be behind a one-way mirror and listen to them. And so toward the end, I began, to say that, they're getting hung up on this. And that's not what the case is about. And I began to think, I'm now older than almost anybody on this jury, and I'm not sure I can relate to them anymore. I'm not sure I understand how they think. And I thought, that and the mandatory retirement, it's time to quit trying lawsuits.
The time came. I think that'll happen in any business, right?
Well, it does. It comes at different times.
And I think as an attorney, but also in any business, I think the older you get, there's a new thought process, a new generation, and you realize that we're no longer in that thought process.
And I'd gone all my life being the youngest in everything. So I was 23 when I got out of law school. Most people are 25 or older. And so one of my nicknames was Baby Phil. And so I was always the youngest in class and always the youngest at the law firm, the youngest to do this and the youngest to do that, the youngest to make partner. And so I thought of myself in that way. And then slowly I began thinking, I'm not the youngest, I'm the oldest.
Yeah.
And that was,
It reversed.
revelatory. I thought, look.
Yeah. Look, 40 years, what an incredible career, though. I mean, even if there's forced retirement, even if you saw that, it was time to leave. I remember I've been in my business for 34 years. And when I started, my boss transferred me to California and I didn't want to go. I mean, he literally forced me, pulled me, and dragged me to Los Angeles, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about old time, right? Sits in front of me one day and says, I brought you to California because I just want to be able to come in here and talk to you. Wow. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Right? But I will say that he was a great mentor and I learned a lot from that. Those talks we would have, whether it was in his office or my office, taught me a lot, right? Those types of mentorship, I feel, is being lost a little bit, if not a lot, because people don't work together anymore. They're like all in their own little house or cubicle and they do the Zoom call. And I think you miss that.
There's nothing, I would tell young lawyers who finally, the technology came and they were doing everything by email or phone. And I said, I want you once a week to go visit your clients, regardless of what reason you may have. And rather than writing them a letter or an email or calling them saying this is what's happened, go see them, go to lunch. But I want you face to face.
Hey.
And the other thing I would tell them is you're going to live in a silo. You're privileged. You're going to live in a nice part of town. You're working downtown. You're going to get in a car. You're going to drive the same way. You're going to spend 5 or 6 days in this office. You're going to drive back to your house. You're going to see your friends who are just like you and think like you. And you're going to think this is the world. And it isn't. So I want you to go to the DMV and just stand around and look at the people in line because they're going to be your jurors and listen to what they're saying. And then come back and tell me what you learned.
That's good mentorship.
Well, it's essential.
Because it's true. We live in our bubble.
Absolutely.
And the bubble is not reality. It's your bubble.
Right.
I say this to like people talking about politics, and I go, yeah, well, we all say, well, I don't think that because of this, because we all live with the people that think like us.
That's it. And it's gotten worse.
Yeah.
I think, the news is such that people listen to news that says what they want to hear. And they are friends with people who are like them. And so there's just, there's not much perspective of the world.
There isn't a person that I talk to like yourself, great man, good character, great career, that doesn't tell me about how society is in this sort of bad shape because they can't sit down and have differences and be friends, right? I can sit down with somebody that is completely thinks different than me. We can have a great, passionate debate. I can go eat with them. I can go to dinner and we're still friends. But unfortunately today it does feel like they get in their bubble and they're not coming in here and you're not going in there and it's draw the line and we're going to live in the bubble.
I just thought this, one of the things that's happened is in Texas, maybe until 40, 50 years ago, was essentially rural. And there were certainly cities, and people lived in cities. And now it's predominantly urban. And if you're in a small town, you know everybody. And that means you know the poorest guy in town and you know the richest guy in town. And you interact with everybody. So of necessity, you have some kind of exposure to more than your viewpoint. Mm-hmm. But in big cities, it's easy. Again, it's so easy to get siloed.
Yeah, and find your little
And
world.
And your little world may have, thousands of people in it. But I'm a great believer in guilt. Having been raised a Catholic, so we're well schooled in that. And so I really do feel like I've been fortunate in life and been given a lot of things, and I need to give something back. And that didn't occur to me in my 20s and 30s, but the older I got, the more I thought about it. And so I got active in various organizations, and I thought, well, the easy thing to do is write a check. But that really isn't, it's not meaningless, but it just doesn't satisfy.
It's needed, but it's not all.
It's not satisfying. Mm-hmm. So then I said, well, I'm going to get involved in organizations where I can do something in addition to writing a check that's me. And then I thought about it. I said, what I really need to do is change somebody's life in a one-on-one situation. And I thought about it. I went to church, and there was a dean of the cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral downtown, named Pittman McGee. And he had the series before the service, and he said, there are all these big problems in the world, and I'm sure you, like most people, are sitting there thinking, this is a really big problem, and I need to do something about it, but it's so big, I can't begin to do anything. He said, let me tell you a story, and this may give you the answer. He said, about 2 years ago, I took my family to the beach, and my youngest had never seen the ocean. And so we're walking toward the water, and he starts running, and I'm right behind him, and I'm thinking he's either going to run in the ocean and panic, and I'm going to go in and pull him out, or he's going to run in the ocean and get too far out, and I'm going to have to go in and pull him out. And he didn't either. And he stopped short of the water and dug a hole, and it filled up with water, and he played in that. So that's how you deal with big problems. And I thought about that, and I thought, my gosh, that is. So one of the things I've done is we have a wonderful housekeeper who's Filipino, and she is family. And she has a son who's exceptional, smart, and, just everything you could want in a person, but never quite had the opportunities that everybody else has had. And so I, early on, he's about my size. I'd give him clothes. I would take him to places. I'd take him to museums. I'd take him to eat. And we'd talk about, how to deal with this situation. How do you deal with that? And that's, to me, the most satisfying thing I've ever done.
That's fantastic. I mean, you're dead on, and keep doing it as long as you can do it, because money is needed, right? We all are involved with charities that need to have funds, right. But funds is a piece of the story.
That's right.
Right? I know our kids, they need mentorship, and we strategically place mentors. So like at lunch, we put mentors sitting next to them.
Wow.
The van drivers that transport them back and forth are mentors, and they talk to them on the way, right? Because the kids that we're dealing with aren't necessarily open, but when you become their friend, when you're the bus driver, all of a sudden, and the bus driver is the mentor, right?
Right.
Kids may not necessarily know that, but the bus driver is the mentor. The people that eat lunch with are mentors. I had a mentor. You had a mentor.
Right.
We need mentors in our life.
No, I think it's key. And particularly with the family situation becoming less and less a factor. So many people growing up with one parent or no parent, and a grandparent raising them. It's really sad.
It is.
And so I think, those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to do so, I think have an obligation, a moral obligation to do something besides giving money.
I mean, I, like you, Christian background, I believe that God blesses us to bless others. That doesn't necessarily just mean money. It means mentorship, helping, giving clothes, taking somebody to a beach, taking them to a theater for the first time, many different ways. But I grew up in that, and I believe in that. But I remember one time as a kid, a child, I might have been 12 years old, but I saw this. I saw Bob Hope on a Christmas special somewhere in some war place or with military. And they asked Bob Hope, one of the questions was, why do you do this? Why don't you spend Christmas with your family? Why are you always, every year, Christmas, you're somewhere? And he says, I've been blessed with a lot, and the least I can do is give some of it back.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that.
That's a great philosophy.
I've been blessed with a lot. The minimum I can do, just give some of this back.
Exactly.
Okay, a couple quick questions. Of all the places you've traveled, which is your favorite?
I think Italy. I love Italy.
That's number one. I mean, we can interview 1,000 people.
They always say Italy.
Italy is in the top. Is there a place you haven't been to that you want to go?
There are two places. I thought about this. My father's Lebanese. And so the family village, and it is a village that his father came from, is still around. And so long ago, I thought, well, we need to go take my family, visit the people. And my parents, when we were living in Libya, had gone and visited, and I have photographs, and I was too young to go with them. So, and we kept up with them in a sort of desultory way, but there was still contact. And so I'm all set. I've got the trip planned, and it turned out that they discovered oil and gas in the Mediterranean. And the field initially was offshore Israel, but it was pretty clear it would extend to the offshore Lebanon. And Lebanon did not have any oil and gas laws. So they hired Baker Botts to write oil and gas laws. And we had a Lebanese agent. And so I think, well, this is the time to go. So I emailed him and I said, I want to go. And actually my last name is John, but it really is Hannah, which is John in Arabic. So my grandfather came over, El Salni. I said, this is
John's close enough.
This is easy. This is easier for you. So I wrote the guy and I said, I'd like to come bring my family and get somebody to drive us and take us around. And I want to go visit the family village, Fursel, near Zakli. And he writes back, Fursel, the village of drunkards. So I'm thinking, okay, this is great. We're all set to go. We're going to do that, and we'll do, we had the trip. And then one of the civil wars broke out. And he says, don't come now. So we didn't come. But my daughter wound up, she's very adventurous and lives in New York. And she got invited to a wedding in Beirut, so she went. And she called them up. And they came, drove her to the family village, and it was just like, they had our pictures. I mean, it was very warming, and they did a little video to come. So I'm thinking, okay, we're going to come. Well, of course, things have gone from bad to worse to worse. So, on the adage of charity begins at home, I send them money periodically just because. And I get these sad things back. Today I gave so-and-so, and everyone's last name is Hannah. I think there's a lot of incest that's going on. We gave her $50 for insulin. So-and-so got $100 for heating. It's just sad. And so one of my goals in life is
real world problems
is to go there before I die. And the other place I want to go and will go soon is Japan.
Let me know. We have an office in Japan.
You're kidding.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, I've traveled a lot, but those are two places.
Tokyo's fascinating place.
Yeah, and I want to go to Kyoto.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, that's beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. What's your favorite food?
Seafood,
Seafood. Okay, all kinds of seafoods.
all kinds of seafood. I love oysters, but I love anything, any seafood.
You like those New Orleans charbroiled oysters with all the garlic and butter?
They're fine. My preference are
The raw.
PEI
Yeah.
oysters. Yeah.
Yeah. I do like those charb.
Oh, they're good.
With the butter and the French bread and
Load it up.
what was your first car?
Oh, you'll love this. So I'm in college and I've got a job and I'm an assistant sergeant in arms at the Texas House of Representatives. And I had no car. And so I would walk from where I was near campus to the Capitol. And that got old. And so my dad said, well, okay, we're going to get you a car. And I never had a car. So here I am, I'm in college, didn't have a car in high school, was dependent on the kindness of strangers to get anywhere. And this is a real tragedy. So my grandfather on my mother's side had a Chevrolet dealership in Floresville, Texas. And I thought, well, surely my dad's going to go get me a Chevrolet. And, in those days you were either a Ford man or a Chevrolet man or a Chrysler man. So I was a Chevrolet man. And I would have taken a Bell, anything. And so my dad said, we got you a car. I said, what'd you get? And he said, well, it was going to be a surprise. I thought, okay. And so he says he and my mother are going to caravan up, deliver the car to me. They were living in San Antonio at the time, and I'm in Austin. And so they tell me about the time they're going to be there, and I'm standing in front of the fraternity house where I was staying, and I see his car, and I see this red VW Beetle. I go, oh, shit. So this car shows up, and it's a used VW Beetle. And, well, I eventually got out of him because I could have had a used Chevrolet for what he paid. And this car had 36 horsepower. It did not have a gas gauge. It had that reserve tank, and you flip that over. So when you ran out of gas,
Yeah, you knew that you were out. You flipped the switch, and then you had to go get gas.
and no radio, and of course no air conditioning. And I'm thinking,
And probably stick.
and it was, of course, it was still, and it was so underpowered. And Austin has some hills; they're not great hills, but on the big hills, you had to have a real running start, because if you didn't, you get about halfway up the hill and you couldn't.
Down it goes.
Down it goes. So that was my first car.
Wow, that's a great story. Oddly enough, when we came from Cuba, that was our first car.
Yeah.
But we were eight. We were 8 people.
Whoa.
And that's the car that we all used as we all lived in one bedroom apartment when we came from Cuba. So the Phil John Museum.
Yeah.
What is the car that needs to be there in there?
Well, it's the car I would have had when I was young, and that probably would have been a Corvette. When you're young, cars are really important, and you truly believe your success in dating was directly commensurate with the car you had. And I was always envious of these guys with nice cars, lots of clothes.
I think to a certain point in that time it was,
Absolutely.
the convenience of being able to take a girl from here to there, and the dad and their family going, okay, well, he at least can get you from there to here,
Exactly.
Phil, somebody that's in UT right now, A&M, they're working their way to become an attorney. What's one piece of advice you would give?
I think the piece of advice I would give them is get yourself a lot of experience and really work hard on learning how to write. And that's becoming increasingly difficult. People don't know how to write anymore. And I think it's still a vital skill. Learn how to write and learn how to talk. Everything else you can learn. But you really need to be comfortable with those two things before you ever get to law school.
That's great advice. And it's true.
And, you know,
I think they don't even teach cursive anymore.
they don't.
I don't know people, like I remember practicing in school to sign your name.
And, you know, they've done, you're talking about stage of the brain, you know, it's more than just a way to write. It helps form your brain at a time when your brain is still developing. We got away with a lot of things. We got away with a recess.
That's in the book.
And, you know, I thought that, think how many lessons you learned at recess.
That's in the book. The book says you're supposed to go on the monkey bars and fall down. But now the schools are scared of lawsuits, right? Schools are scared of a parent getting upset. And so now it's bubble the kid. And they're not getting that development that's supposed to be by going out in the play yard and letting them play.
Yeah.
You know, not being orchestrated by a teacher. They got to go out and make friends and figure things out and talk to the girl that they like and, you know, talk to the guy that they don't like, you know, and it's just part of growing up. It's part of growing up. Phil, you know, I love talking to you and people like you. You get it comes out that you are a man of character.
Well,
You are a man of character, a man of kindness, very intelligent, great life. One house, one wife, one career is pretty darn good.
that's pretty good.
Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Wheels, Deals, and Meals, your main source for all things good and fun, business, food, and cars. If you like this episode, make sure to rate us and subscribe. If you would like to be a guest on our show, please leave a message at the link below. Till next time, happy eating.